Battery bill. Battery bill. For cameras, computers, cars, or scooters. For trucks, boats, jet skis, remotes. Battery bill. Battery bill.
Welcome to another Aloha Friday, and that means ESPN Fan Friday Talk Story. And today, a lot of things have come up over the past couple of weeks, and sometimes when you have different things popping in, it's great to get someone who pretty much covers everything that comes with it. So from the Star-Advertiser, someone who covers high school sports, U8 sports, you name it, whatever's going on. We're going to talk a little bit of Little League World Series because that's what's really trending now. Billy Hull joining us from the Star-Advertiser. Billy, first of all, thanks for joining us on Fan Friday Talk Story.
No problem, Dave. How's it going, man?
Good. Now, Little League World Series, we're going to save that for a little bit toward the end, but one thing that was kind of made a splash, I think it came out maybe a couple of weeks ago, was that documentary about the Manti Te'o situation on Netflix. I think it was 2 weeks ago. So I think it's titled The Girlfriend That Didn't Exist. So, back in 2012, I mean, hard to believe it's been that 10 years ago when he was a senior at Notre Dame and that great season he had, great career, second place in the Heisman voting, and then all this stuff came out about being catfished and new terminology, all this stuff related to social media that now we kind of take it as second nature, but back then, 10 years ago, it's kind of fresh. And you did a review for the Star-Advertiser on that documentary. I just watched it. So give us some highlights about the review that you wrote.
Yeah, it was I'm kind of a sports guy, so I haven't done a whole lot of reviews in my life, so I was a little bit scared to do it at first, but no, it was really fun. It was really, I think that my first takeaway from the whole thing is I think over time kind of forgot just how big of a story it was. I mean, this was a national story, and I think I lead the review with the fact that, hey, it didn't matter if you were a fan of football or you didn't watch football. You heard about the story, and everybody had an opinion about it right away. Everyone rushed to judgment. Everyone had some type of idea about what happened exactly. And so I just thought it was really good to kind of finally hear from Manti and kind of hear his story and hear exactly about how it all went down. I think what's interesting is we all are kind of a little more educated on what catfishing is now, but you got to remember, back when this whole thing started, we all, for the most part in this world, learned what catfishing was at the same time. And so I think nobody really realized just how intricate it was, just how mischievous it was. And so to finally kind of get a perspective from the very beginning of how it all unfolded, how it started, you get Manti, starting growing up in Laie, playing at Punahou, and then ended up going to Notre Dame over USC at the last minute, which was kind of a very interesting part of the documentary. And then we just saw kind of how this whole thing played out. And so, I think when it was all said and done, it was really hard not to feel a lot of empathy towards Manti and everything he went through, because he did lose a lot in this whole thing.
Yeah, and at the very end, I mean, my wife and I were watching it, and that very last, and it was two episodes, right? So part one, part two, but the very end, that basically the last words to end the whole documentary that Manti is saying that, he endured people looking at him differently, from, as you said, from, hey, that's Manti Te'o to, oh no, that's Manti Te'o. And he was emotionally expressing how hard it was, but yet he said, he forgives the person who did it. And then, I mean, after that, it's like, oh my goodness. I mean, the pain and that you really felt it in that last 5 minutes, really, of the whole thing about what it all engulfed him into, totally none of his doing. And it made me think about the person who really did it, how elaborate that whole scheme was. The whole, not only creating the girlfriend, but he created like 2 or 3 or 4 other characters, quote unquote. Even himself was a cousin of the girlfriend. But it was this whole charade of people that he portrayed with different voices. I mean, that was pretty elaborate.
Oh, it was incredibly elaborate. And even to go so far as, one of the things was he actually talked to a couple of his friends and said, hey, have you heard of this person, Lene Keku? And they're like kind of vouched for her, so I mean, once you get that, you kind of, it kind of goes away thinking that, oh, I don't need to worry about whether this person exists or not or whatever. And so You saw a lot of things. The guy ended, and I think it's been a couple weeks now. So spoiler alert if you haven't watched it. We'll talk about the ending. But I think the way I kind of ended my review was, and I thought the most important thing is you could still hear the emotion in his voice. And this was obviously hopefully a way of him to kind of express himself and be able to kind of move on it, because you could definitely tell in some of the answers he's had, some of the ways he was talking, that this is still very real to him. This is still a very emotional thing to him. And so you hope now that he can use this documentary to kind of move on. And so the way I kind of ended it was very nice of him and very, kind of incredible that he's able to forgive this person that did so much damage to him. But when it kind of ended right after that, and you just kind of left thinking, I'm glad that, he's able to forgive Renaya Tuiasosopo, but I really hope he can forgive himself. I really hope that he can move past this and move on with his life, because, like I said, even when they talked about, this, girlfriend that turned out to be fake, Lene Kikuo, in the documentary dying, when he answered it now, you still heard kind of the emotion in his voice. So, it was a terribly traumatic thing for him. I think nobody really empathized with him about everything he went through after the whole ordeal. And so I just kind of hoped at the very end of it that I'm glad he was able to forgive the person that did this to him. But boy, I really hope he was able to forgive himself, and I really hope that he allowed this documentary to kind of move on, because the emotion and all the kind of sadness you could hear in his voice was something that really stood out with me the entire documentary.
And Billy, as sports guys, we always look at kind of a person's legacy, so to speak, based on he had a great college career.
Yeah.
His NFL career did not materialize into obviously replicate the type of level that he had in college. And you see that all the time. A lot of great college guys don't automatically become great NFL guys. But he said it in the documentary that when he started playing in the NFL, again, this is post all of this catfish stuff, when he would step on the field before he was with the Chargers, he always had that confidence, like this is his domain. Everything was ready. This was his comfort zone. He could just react. But then in the NFL, he felt very anxious, uneasy. And, you got to think that whole episode he went through from end of his senior year, finding out that it's all fake, playing in the national championship game with that on his mind and all of this brimming, going through the combines, getting drafted in the second round, that had to all have affected the fact that he did not have that same mentality and attitude that he had all his life prior to that point. And granted, he had his foot injury. He dealt with injuries too, but it's the attitude part, I think, that really derailed what could have been potentially an outstanding NFL career.
Oh, 100%. I know he talked about the anxiety he had right before his first preseason game, but there's no question it's a self-doubt. And I think, sometimes people forget that when you watch an NFL game, you have your starters and the best players on the field or whatever. But you know what? That 53rd man on that NFL team, he's in the NFL because he believes he's the best player in the world. All these guys that get to the highest level of their professional sport, they don't have any self-doubt. They're not worried about what they're doing. They're out there playing. That's why they're there. And there's no question that, once you're out there and you're not playing freely and you're not, doing what you've always done, and you just kind of are always doubting yourself and questioning yourself, and you're spending the time during the thing, I've got to make this tackle. Hey, I've got to do this. I've got so much pressure to do this. That's really where you crumble. And so that's, and look, you can't blame him. This was such, like I said, we kind of forgot about just how big of a story it was. This was the ultimate embarrassing national shame. To make it to the Heisman and to have this thing where you end up realizing that you were catfished, that you thought that there was this person out in this world that loved you and she didn't exist, and you were played by somebody that took it to the levels that, she did. Did anybody realize that she was playing different characters on the phone and talk to the parents? Even the parents were involved in talking to this person. That's how elaborate this was. And so when you then kind of get that picture in the documentary where they show, the different kind of cable news networks, and, you see Anderson Cooper on there and the Katie Couric thing, and you see the skits on Saturday Night Live, and just, the lengths, all the memes that they made on the internet, the lengths to which that you were kind of made a fool of. How could you not go through what he did? How could you not, it's got to be tremendously depressing. And so I just give him credit that he was able to come out, all these years later and just do this, there's some people that would never be able to talk about it. There's people that have handled it so much worse than he did. So, I give him credit for that. But, No, totally. I mean, when you start doubting who you are as a person, when you start doubting at the highest levels of your sport, your abilities, that's kind of when it's all done for you. And so it was unfortunate that he never really got to be the player that he was in college. And I even kind of forgot a little bit just how good he was in college. That's kind of unfortunately part of this thing too, is, always kind of was remembered as the guy that had the girlfriend that didn't exist. And unfortunately, it kind of took away from some of us remembering just how good he was in college and just how good he was in high school. I mean, you saw Pete Carroll hanging around at Aloha Stadium for a high school game at a time where USC was at the peak of its powers. I mean, it was a big deal. He was the number one rated recruit in one publication at one point, and there was so much surrounding all of his games every time he played. So, yeah, Manti Te'o was a huge star, and I think this was kind of an opportunity to kind of remember that.
You cover high school sports too, and that, segues into this. Can you recall all the times you've covered, if you took Manti Te'o away, another high school player out of Hawaii in football that had that kind of talent? He was a 3-year starter at Punahou. Can you recall anyone to even come on that level?
I mean, he was kind of the boy. In my time, I pretty much kind of started covering right before he started, like 2005. So in my, 17 years, I think Tua obviously became a really big deal, and Tua was kind of one of those guys that, we knew right away. Like, I mean, I remember his sophomore year, even before he was really kind of on the national radar. He came in and he started as a backup, and when he played the first time, I think I saw his first ILH game against Kamehameha. I remember I went on the radio with Bobby Curran, and I said, I don't want to put too much on this guy, but I've never seen anything like what I just saw at Aloha Stadium on Friday night. And then he kind of became a pretty sought after guy. Obviously, there's been some other like really highly recruited rated guys, but in terms of just the national focus and what a big deal he was as the number one recruit, and him choosing to go to Notre Dame of all places, which I think only enhanced it even more. No, I'd say he probably has got to be the biggest high school recruit there's ever been. I mean, he was unbelievable. He was a 5-star. He was rated the top guy at his position for a reason.
Yeah, you mentioned the Pete Carrolls, the Charlie Weiss just coming down to Aloha Stadium to watch games. The Tua, Jim Harbaugh bringing his coaching staff to do a clinic at St. Louis. Oh, I don't think he just came to do it just out of the graces of, hey, let's do something for the few folks in Hawaii. He did it to try and recruit Tua.
Right, totally. And then you remember with Tua, Lane Kiffin, was out here. I think he was the offensive coordinator in Alabama, right? And so he was out here for Tua. So, no, Tua, I think by the time he got to his senior year was big time. And obviously a quarterback, I mean, the difference between a quarterback and any other position, even linebacker, is a big deal. But, I mean, Tua still, I don't think at the end of the day, in terms of like the recruiting rankings, ended up being as high as Manti was. I mean, Manti went into his senior season as like maybe the clear-cut number one guy at his position. And I think it was Sporting News had him the number one overall recruit, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, those are kind of the first two that come to mind. There's been some other guys at some other positions that have been, highly regarded. I think of Michael Elatise had 40-something offers out of Kaiser. But in terms of just that stardom and that national spotlight, I think those are the two guys you'd look at for sure.
Because I don't think Marcus even got that kind of national exposure. I do remember he was offered at Oregon after his junior year, and he didn't even start yet. I mean, that was kind of news because he would only start his senior year. But in terms of, like you said, the expansive attention for an entire year, I don't think even Marcus got that.
No, well, you're right. I mean, half of it was Marcus didn't even play until his senior year. And I believe going into his senior year, he only had 2 offers. I think it was Oregon and Washington were the only 2 schools that offered him. So he really was kind of an under the radar kind of guy and stuff. So, yeah, Marcus didn't really have that attention. And also the other thing you got to give Manti credit for is, recruiting now. Hawaii 15, 20 years ago, the big storyline was like it was really hard for guys to get seen in Hawaii. So Manti is kind of the first guy that really kind of broke through that and really is the guy that got all these coaches and all of this recruiting attention to come out to Hawaii. And I think from there it started to build to the point that now, every year, I mean, there's 20, 25 kids at some point. I think this year there's a whole bunch of kids in the class of 2023 that are going to go. You've already got, the Kuku kid, Leone Leofau going to Texas. So I think now a lot of people, they don't sleep on Hawaii talent anymore. It's a lot easier for Hawaii kids to get seen. Also, they do a good job, and these families do a good job. If they get out to the camps and stuff on the mainland and stuff, they make sure their kids get seen a lot more. But back in Manti's day, you know, we still weren't at that point yet, and it was a lot harder for kids to get seen. So for him to break through the way he did and become this prominent figure that everyone was watching to see where they would go, I mean, that was a really big deal.
No doubt. Speaking of talented kids in Hawaii, we're going to shift now because right now going on is that Little League World Series. And I think I just heard on the news, so the team just qualified for the U.S. Championship. I think this is the 8th team from Hawaii to qualify for this or something like that for the Little League World Series. Am I right about that?
Somewhere around there, yeah. Yeah, I think so. And just look at the success they've had recently. I mean, like Hawaii is becoming the superstar kind of team, and especially this year's team. You know, I have to be honest, I hadn't watched a ton of them until yesterday, and then I covered the game. And boy, I mean, when you see them play, the big difference between I think last year definitely, and maybe even something in sport, Dave, these kids are huge. These kids are monsters. I mean, I'm looking one by one at them coming up to the plate, and I'm just like, oh, this team, now they've got the power. Now they've got, I mean, 1 through 9, they can hit home runs. You saw it yesterday. I mean, the kid hit 2 home runs, and the coach after saying, yeah, you know, he's really been struggling. I'm like, that kid's been struggling? Like, oh, my goodness. So they've had some really good teams in the past, and we'll see what happens these next couple of games. But, I mean, this is about as amazing, as dominant of a team. I even joked about it, you know, yesterday saying, I don't know about anyone else, but I almost kind of feel bad. Like, I mean, the way they're making these other really good teams from these other states look, and then these kids are just kind of walking off the mound just dejected after pitching to these guys. I mean, this team really is unbelievable. This is I don't know if it's a once in a lifetime thing because we've had a lot of good teams, but this is an amazing Little League team this year.
Yeah, and like you said, they're 12 years old on the verge of 13. Maybe some of them, due to the birth date, have actually turned 13. But they give you the height and all this stuff for the kids. And these are, I was 5'2" when I was 12 years old, even going into 13. So yeah, they're growing bigger. This group obviously has established itself with a different personality and character because of that offense. They have mercy ruled just everybody and that onslaught. Whereas the other Hawaii teams were, you know, good fundamentals. They had a couple of good pitchers. They could have timely hitting. But this one is just this powerhouse at the plate. And they're just setting themselves aside from every other team that has made the World Series.
Oh, yeah, and to me, the stat that was crazy, and this was before, I don't know what happened in yesterday afternoon. There was a couple games after their game yesterday. But after their game yesterday, they had hit 11 home runs in 4 games in the Little League World Series. The other 19 teams had combined to hit 13 home runs. I mean, that's how dominant they are. I mean, 19 other teams have been able to hit 2 more homers than this team has hit in 4 games. And who knows, by the time it's all said and done, I mean, they might end up beating all the other teams combined with the way it's going. And then the other thing was their shortstop, Lancaster. I don't know. I actually made sure, you know, offense is kind of always the main thing. You get some defensive highlights. He turned 2 double plays that didn't look like he had any chance of getting the guy at first, and he's just throwing these missiles down the line. I'm thinking, you know, if somebody gets in the way of this, it's going to be bad with how close the bases are because this kid has just got a rifle of an arm. I mean, it's incredible to watch. I mean, they're fun just to watch catch pop flies. You know, that's how good they are. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm sure, you know, like always, you know, Hawaii does such a good job of rallying behind their teams. I'm sure a lot of people will be glued to the TV Saturday. I think it's 9:30 in the morning. It's going to be a big deal, and these kids just look like an absolute juggernaut right now.
The thing is, right, so we're recording this on Thursday. They played yesterday, Wednesday. This will air Friday because it's Fan Friday, so they'll play on Saturday. They will have 2 complete days of no games, so all of their pitchers, I believe, become available to them because there's all those rules with pitch counts and the amount of rest. But how has the pitching been, or is it simply they just get out to these big leads in the first and second inning, and the other team is just emotionally demoralized that the pitching is maybe but is the pitching there to kind of complement the hitting?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I think other teams are hitting like 100 off of them or something in this thing. And look, they went out yesterday. It was in their chance to get to the U.S. Championship game. They threw their 3rd best pitcher, and they combined with another guy to get a shutout. I mean, these guys, their top two guys are going to be more than well rested for these games this weekend. So that makes it even more deadly. So, their top two guys have been unhittable. I just there's not enough words to say just how dominant this team is. Like it would be, and I'm a little hesitant to say it because these are 11 and 12-year-olds, and you don't want to put this kind of pressure on them. But it would be, I think, a monumental upset if they don't, finish this off this weekend. They've just been too good.
Yeah, they can handle the pressure.
Yeah, seriously, they're out there. They got all the cameras on them. They're used to it already.
These
Gerald Oda, the coach, does a great job getting them ready. Yeah, they'll be fine.
Yeah, they're on national TV. I'm not gonna sweat with them. Hey, I want to close with this. Okay, so this is the first time you wrote a review, right, for this documentary. If there was a movie, maybe one of your better sports movies that you could do a review on, what would it be?
Oh, man. I'd probably, because I haven't watched it in a long time, and because I've really enjoyed what Major League Baseball has done, I think I'd want to review Field of Dreams.
Yes.
And it's really because those two Fox games they've done the last 2 years, going out there and playing those games. That was just been so cool to watch, and it's one of those things where I've told myself, all right, I want to go watch Field of Dreams again, and I haven't been able to do it. So I'd probably say if I had to do a review, I'd want to review that movie just so it made me go back and watch it again, because that's something I really want. I've actually been wanting to do that now for like a year and a half. So I'd go with Field of Dreams for sure. But my runner-up choice, because it's my secret under-the-radar favorite sports movie, I'd want to go see Jamie Foxx, Al Pacino, and Any Given Sunday again, because I loved that movie. So those would be my two right there. Although that review might be a little bit more not PG, if you know what I mean.
Which character kind of gravitates to you? Because there's a lot of loaded cast members in there. You got Cameron Diaz as the daughter of the owner, Jamie Foxx, the quarterback, Pacino, the disheveled head coach. You got LL Cool J in there.
Exactly. Oh man, I thought Al Pacino. I mean, his speech. The speech that everyone remembers him giving. The game of inches. That was an unbelievable scene. So I've probably watched that movie 6 or 7 times. So that'd be a fun one to do too.
Oh, and Lawrence Taylor was in there.
Yeah, right? Lawrence Taylor. You can't forget Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, it was awesome.
Taylor. By the way, Field of Dreams was on TV like a couple of weeks. Like they kept playing a couple times. I watched it 2 times in 2 days just because, it was on. I even have the DVD. So.
Oh wow! I'll have to hit you up for it then.
Yeah. Next time I see it, I'll have it with me. And my bucket list is to go to that field in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
Bucket list. I got to see it. And now that with a big stadium next to it, more so.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's one of those things that Major League Baseball has done that's really been good to kind of hopefully get some eyeballs on the sport. Because I know every time I see that's going to happen now, you have to watch it. You have to see what they do in the introductions. I'm a Seattle guy, so this last one, seeing Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. walking out, it was actually a little bit emotional for me. So, man, I'd love to go out there. I'd even to see one of those games. I'm sure tickets are impossible to get, but that really would be a bucket list kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And that was great with the whole father-son element of the movie, Ken Griffey Sr. Perfect, so awesome. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. By the way, great review. Your first documentary review, but great review. But thank you for coming on Fan Friday Talk Story, and we'll look forward to seeing and reading you as we cover going to this coming football and high school season.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me.